Well, good afternoon. Well, I'm going to share some thoughts about Rose's early activism. But I guess, so I knew Rose from her work with the anti-apartheid movement in Berkeley in 1985, and from that time we went on to travel to Africa together and to be teachers there. But to be honest, I think that what Rose brought to her activism, even at the earliest stages, was not only her incredible love, which was so deep, but her working class consciousness. You know, Rose, I was saying last night to my friends, you know, she was so proud of her family. You know, the deep roots, she was so proud of her mother and father and how hard they worked, and she felt like they need that folks who work that hard need to be honored. And she was so proud of her Portuguese heritage, and that she's the granddaughter of Portuguese immigrants. And so she always had a strong anti-racist and working class orientation. So that's what she brought to the anti-apartheid work in 1985. Now, what's kind of funny about Rose was at the same time, so we had the Campaign Against Apartheid was a collection of community folks and students who were trying to stop university investment in companies doing business in South Africa. And we used a lot of direct action, and you can study that movement, but, the tactics escalated, and direct action was the call of the day, and it was very radical and militant and all these things. And so Rose caught the tail end. In 1985, there was a sit-in that lasted for about 6 weeks. And so she joined in that summertime and going into the fall. And you know, there's this incredibly competent, college-educated, dedicated young woman, radical. That by day, she's working for Willie Brown, the Speaker of the House, and full Democrat, you know, absolute Democrat party politics. But she was doing casework, a lot of constituent work. So she was working with folks who needed help. So that was how she made her daily bread. And at night, she'd be hanging out with the communists, socialists, anarchists, and, you know, not yet disclosed, you know, folks who were involved in all kinds of styles of protest. And, you know, Rose was an organizer, and that she took that super fine project completion kind of mind that she had. And she was instrumental in the picket that was put up to stop the unloading of cargo from ships coming from South Africa. So there was a big ship action in San Francisco where we stopped the longshoremen from unloading that cargo. So the trick was to get hundreds of people to the dock at 5 o'clock in the morning. And so that was the work that Rose was engaged in. She also, she wrote for Between the Lines, the radical kind of newsletter that grew out of the Steps movement. And she also was very instrumental in the organizing for the Shantytown protest, which was sort of in 1986, in the spring of '86, the divestment movement sort of peaked in this conflict of placing shanties, which were meant to symbolize the oppression and the poverty and the conditions that people, that Black South Africans were living in, and to bring that right to the university administration. And it erupted into there was riots and this pitched battle and this whole thing. And again, Rose was diligent. She was there, she was core. She was a core organizer in that effort. But interestingly, in the summer of 1986, we won, I guess, right? I mean, divestment happened, theoretically, divestment. The regents of the University of California voted to divest. But what was also happening at that time was the wars in Central America and the death squads in El Salvador and the U.S. involvement. And what was happening for a lot of the women in the campaign against apartheid was that we were inheriting the legacy from women who participated in groups like Women Against Imperialism. And we were influenced by these analyses. And so Rose would easily describe herself as an anti-imperialist, as wanting to smash patriarchy. And so that feminist consciousness was happening for some of us at that time. And so we, with not a total understanding of history, called ourselves the Women's Liberation Front. Which that name apparently had been used before. So we did things like, we decided to, this was also part of Rose's jiu-jitsu period. And so she was learning self-defense and studying jiu-jitsu. So we organized self-defense classes for women. And we organized Take Back the Night marches and asserted strongly the involvement of militarism, of how militarism was affecting us as women, and how imperialism abroad. And so we chose the ROTC Center on campus, the ROTC, the Officer Training Building, and we had a 24-hour protest. And we were very ambitious. And it was at this, to be honest, I think that it was when we started to organize these kinds of actions that Rose went from being a really powerful supporter, like a really dependable comrade, to beginning to realize her own vision and to beginning to feel empowered to, like, we decided we were going to shut down ROTC. We decided we were going to take back the night. So I think that also sort of colored her politics for years to come, that empowerment, and I can also say that I think that even traveling in Africa and being a teacher and having all those experiences that she could bring to her own activism, I think that empowerment was really important in terms of her coming back to America and beginning to lead and beginning to project her vision of how she wanted the struggle to proceed. I can also say that maybe not a lot of people know about her art period. So at that time in the 80s, we were just so in our 20s. And so we felt like it was sort of our obligation to do some street art. We felt like it was, if everybody else was going to go out wheat pasting or doing graffiti or this kind of stuff, that we should also do some art. And that once there was this billboard. It was a terrible billboard. It was for eggs, but what it had was a woman's torso in a yellow one-piece bathing suit, no head, no legs, just the torso with an egg in the small of the woman's back, and the slogan was, "Everything goes better with eggs." Is that offensive? Absolutely. So Rose and I decided that we were going to do something about it. We didn't really bother. We didn't get a whole lot of education about how to do that, but we decided paint balloons were going to be our instrument. So she had some orange paint and I had some balloons. So we managed to fill a few of these balloons with orange paint, and Rose was going to drive the getaway car, and we were going to go around and deface these billboards. So we go to the first billboard, and I played softball, so I was chosen to throw the balloons. And we stopped at the first one, and I threw that thing, and it barely did anything. It was amazing how little coverage you get with a paint balloon. But these billboards were all over the place, so we drove over to one, and we went down to San Pablo Avenue, and we found one. We were going to get that one. But in the meantime, we found there was a woman whose car had died, and her son, her kids were there too. So we actually got quite involved in helping them, and we got totally sidetracked from our mission, and hours went by. So we were driving back, so it was kind of like 1 o'clock in the morning. Like, let's forget it, let's just go back. We're coming up University Avenue. Son of a gun, if there wasn't one more of those billboards there. So Rose pulls over. She goes, "Go ahead, get that one, get that one." She had great confidence in my throwing skills, apparently. Unfounded, turns out. So I pulled back and I threw to get that billboard on top of the building, and I almost got it. Funny thing, on the top floor there was a window that was open. And And to this day, I think, what is it like to walk out in the morning and see your house kind of splattered with orange paint? You think, why me? So, but I tell you that Rose was, Cory will come up next and share some of what it was like to live with Rose and to travel with her in Africa. And, she studied for the bar exam in Zimbabwe and got ready to, after our 2 years. But I guess what I wanted to say is this, that, as sad as it is to lose a friend, it's sadder still to lose such a powerful part of our movement at such a needy time. And she was a freedom fighter whose style of fighting united us. It united us across so many issues and communities. So I guess I just, I just want to say that I hope that the example of her life can move us to do exactly what she, I think, wanted with this gathering today, which is to move us to ever greater acts of love and resistance. Rose, rest in power.
Hi, I'm Cory, and I've been asked to speak about Rose and the Africa years, so how perfect that I should follow my dear friend Andrea. So here's some background. In 1987, I met Paula while on holiday in San Francisco, fell in love, quit my job, gave everything away, and followed her to Zimbabwe, where she was starting a new volunteer job. But little did I know that a chance leap in the direction of new love would lead to a beautiful son, a 30-year marriage, and the gift of a deep, lifelong friendship with a scrappy bunch of fellow travelers, Andrea, Jenny, and the incomparable, irreplaceable Rose Braz. As for Rose, before Zimbabwe, she needed to check a few things off her to-do list. Campaign against apartheid, check. Block South African cargo ship from entering the bay, check. Help build and occupy a shanty town on campus, check. No surprise then that she was ready for a break from the movement. So she and Andrea set off to travel across Africa. Rose was, spoiler alert, a frugal traveler, hitchhiking when possible and accepting the hospitality of strangers when offered. An adventurous strategy that led to sharing a bathroom with a wildebeest, seriously, and moving in for 3 days with an Indian family that was determined to adopt her. And as she traveled, she listened to rural Kenyans, Rwandan refugees, Ugandan survivors of massacres. She was deeply affected by the people and the struggles she saw everywhere. So she winked at that whole thing about taking a break from the movement, and with letters of introduction in hand, presented herself to the ANC and PAC as a comrade. At their encouragement, she and Andrea went to South Africa and met with organizations on the front line. As they traveled, they documented conflicts and connected with fellow activists. And whether by staying at the home of a banished lawyer, or sharing seditious literature, or challenging the white South Africans she met, Rose took every opportunity to violate unjust apartheid laws. Rose was resolutely intolerant of racism. Next stop, Zimbabwe, 1987, less than 10 years after hard-won independence, a time when promises made during the struggle were still being realized, and people were gaining access to education and health care, many for the first time. There was an air of hope. It makes sense then that she, along with Jenny, Andrea, and myself, would work at Daniko Project in Harare. Daniko was a secondary school and vocational training center for disabled war victims and refugees. We were an eclectic bunch at Daniko, students and staff alike, living side by side, sharing endless pots of tea and bowls of sadza. We were a community that shared love stories and grief stories. We laughed and cried together. And Rose? Rose worked tirelessly to teach her students to read and write. She oversaw the creation of the school library and the publication of the school's first magazine. But she was so much more. She was a beautiful, grounding spirit on campus with an easy, relaxed way about her that attracted us all. She was a great listener. She had a terrific laugh and connected equally with everyone without attention to status. Everyone wanted her attention, and she gave it. She received endless letters of love, endless letters and notes from her students, offering thanks, professing their love, of course, or their agony, seeking her sage advice. Off campus, Rose and our scrappy tribe traveled around the country on the backs of lorries, holding on for dear life as we inhaled dust and gas fumes and chicken feathers. We were alive. And in Harare, we would often take in a serious film. Those rumors about Rose having watched Dirty Dancing 20 times? True. Once back home in the US, our friendship continued. We met her mother, Rosalie, and celebrated the release of her book about Rose, In and Out of Africa. We met her father, Ray, who we have loved dearly for 3 decades. And Rose was there for every milestone in our life. We followed and encouraged each other's work. She officiated at 2 of our 3 weddings, celebrated our son's birth, and we delighted as well in celebrating her deep and beautiful love for Brent. She was a true friend who held us when Paula and I experienced unthinkable loss, and then allowed us to hold her as she followed. She was wicked smart, kind, funny, and most of all, Rose was brave. Not just the hitchhiking in Matabele land in the height of the Troubles kind of brave, though she was that, but the behind-the-scenes organizer steering the ship but never expecting credit kind of brave. The step up and out of her comfort zone when it mattered kind of brave. And when she was front and center, she held that position with the care it called for. Rose was the rarest of people, an ego-free leader. When called to lead, she did so with authenticity and modesty. And man, oh man, was she powerful. We had the gift of sitting with Rose in her final days, as did many people here, and we experienced again that concern and kindness focused more on her friends, on Ray, Joe, Kristen, Frosty, and always, always deeply on Brent than herself. She was kind and brave and loving to the end. And there is a big rose-shaped hole in our hearts. Heavy with grief, but also full of love and binding us together. And we're all part of her scrappy tribe now. Love you.